Hello, and welcome to Kalil Ranks, a show where I'm Kalil, and we're ranking things. And today we're looking at episodes of the anime Revolutionary Girl Utena. This list was already pre-prepared, so all I've done to get set up for right now is I have a list in front of me of all the names of the episodes. I'll be referring to them by name, and that's partly so I can tell what I'm looking at when I stare at all these thumbnails here. So let's get cracking right away with the first episode, The Rose Bride. This is the first episode of the series, as well as the first Saionji duel. So, I think when you're judging a first episode, it's fair to use slightly different criteria, because the first episode has to do a lot of work to set up the tone, as well as the setting and characters of the world. And it's got to hook the viewer into the main concepts enough that they'll want to stick around for more episodes. So with that in mind, I think that if this episode would have been somewhere else in the series, I'd have to judge it a little bit differently. So I'm going to look at episode 1 here, The Rose Bride, in terms of how well I think it sets up Utena as a series. And to be completely honest with you, I think it does a great job. I'm going to put the first episode over in A tier, because I think what the Rose Bride episode does is it allows us to see a mix of the comedy as well as the serious elements that the series has at its disposal. On one hand, you have the silliness factor of Wakaba always jumping on Utena's back, threatening to throw her out of windows almost. There's a bit of a quirkiness to it. We meet Choo-Choo, I believe, in this one. But we also have, like, that weird teacher, who, at least in the English dub, is always like, "Oh, Miss Utena, you gotta wear clothing that looks like a girl." So, a lot of comedy, especially in the dub voice acting department. But there's also tempered with the seriousness of Saionji's physical assault on Anthy, and Utena's determination to try to rescue Anthy, which is pretty much at this point just an impulse. This episode shows Utena kind of jumping into the duelist situation, only with this vague idea that the ring she has is the same kind of ring the duelists have, so that might connect to the prince, but really she just wants to help Anthy right here and right now. And I think showing that impulsive side of Utena is very helpful for this first episode. Next we have the second episode, For Whom the Rose Smiles. So this is the second episode with the Saionji duel, but this time Utena chooses the duel for herself. So what was once impulse is now a direct choice. Along with that, we get more background context for Saionji and a little bit of the inkling of his competitive side with Toga, although that isn't fully to come until later. This episode shows Utena and Anthy, I think, living together more for the first time, kind of that domestic relationship between the two. It's a lot more of a relaxed episode, at least it feels, even though the stakes are really just as high, because now Utena could be losing Anthy already. But it doesn't feel as dangerous, I guess, at least not to my viewing. Saionji is defeated and comes sulking back, kind of only to show his worst sides throughout the episode. We've yet to get to the stage where Saionji's going to be a laughable idiot, but he's definitely not an imposing, victorious character, you know, telling the student council what he wants to do with his Rose Bride. He's kind of an outsider trying, you know, with his tail between his legs to get back what little thing he used to have, what dignity he's lost. I do think it's a good episode. I'm trying to decide between B or C here. I'm going to say C. And when I rank these, in general, I'm looking at it in terms of C is neutral. So I think it's an okay episode for Utena. I think it establishes Saionji pretty well. I think it establishes Anthy and Utena and their relationship pretty well. We get more Choo-Choo hijinks, but I don't think it sets up as many important elements as the first episode, but I also don't think it's necessarily a weak point either. It's an okay entry, and it's carrying off the momentum of the first episode. It really feels like, alright, the first episode she fought Saionji on a whim, now she actually has to fight him. The next episode is a bit of a change of pace. It's one of the non-dueling episodes. This is On the Night of the Ball, the third episode. This is the one where she gets the dress from Nanami, and it really serves as our first introduction to Nanami, as well as kind of to Toga. He's been around prior, but now we see more of his interest in Utena starting to blossom, pun intended. This episode is weird for establishing Nanami, though, because Nanami throughout the series is a lot less... Well, she is vindictive and vicious, don't get me wrong, but the way she's characterized here is much more like Mean Girl's villain of the week sort of thing, which I don't find as compelling or interesting, but it does serve as something to be counteracted later, to be subverted. And I think for that reason, this episode does do a good job setting up Nanami and Toga, so later they can be taken down and reconstructed. And also, very importantly, it shows the Utena and Anthy relationship, that Utena is going to push Anthy to try to go to this dance, and Anthy, as the Rose Bride, will agree to do it. So there's an element of coercion there, that we see Anthy kind of doing it out of obligation. But even at the actual dance, it seems like she genuinely is enjoying her time with Utena. That when they're actually dancing together and Utena shows that almost chivalrous spirit and prince-like attitude of her, that she just grabs that tablecloth, drapes it around Anthy, and suddenly it's a dress, and saves the day, really helps build their relationship at an early foundational point. So I'm going to put that right in between those two episodes in terms of quality at a B ranking. The next episode is one of two Mickey episodes back-to-back. There's the Sunlit Garden Prelude as episode 4, and episode 5 is the Sunlit Garden finale. The two operate as essentially one big episode, and I don't really see a marked quality difference between them. So I'm going to put them together as sort of one idea here, and I'm going to put them together in B tier. And the reason I'm going to put them both in B tier is I think that as setups for Mickey, they do a really good job setting up his fascination or fixation on the sunlit garden of his past with his sister. They do a great job setting up his motivations to duel. I do think that they are above average, pretty good episodes of the series, but lack that sort of intensity that I might expect from some of the later episodes that get a little more higher stakes. I will say, though, one highlight of these episodes for me, and I forget which one of the two it is, but there's the part where Nanami comes over to join their study date, and she's trying to operate, Operation Miss Anthy Himami as a big weirdo, and putting the snails in the pencil box, and the snakes, the mongoose, the octopus, and that's a really good build-up for Nanami that directly, contrasts her vindictiveness in the dancing episode on the night of the ball, because here she's still trying to get back at Anthy, but it's seen as a much more, failed, stupid attempt. Shows how silly she can be, even as she's trying to ruin Anthy's life. How, one, even if she succeeded, it wouldn't destroy Anthy at all, but two, she fails so miserably. Because Anthy's magic and can predict all that in advance and everything. Next we are at episode 6, Take Care, Miss Nanami. This is the Mitsudu introduction episode, where out of just nowhere, animals start attacking Nanami, and Nanami enlists the help of her elementary school boyfriend. We've gotten several different iterations of Nanami at this point, kind of back to back to back, and this is the first of what we'll call the Nanami episodes. The episodes that mainly focus around Nanami that are just really absurd and silly. And we're about to get another one just, really soon, too. So the show's very interested in using these episodes for humor and comic relief. This is probably the last Nanami episode I think of when I think of a Nanami episode. Usually the first one that comes to my mind is either, the Cowbell of Happiness, or, Nanami's Egg. I believe that's that one over here. Nope, right over here's Nanami's Egg. Or even Curried High Trip. But Take Care, Miss Nanami is the foundational one for this. It sets up Mitsudu, and there's that great moment where Toga is boxing a kangaroo in order to protect his sister. So it does do some heavy lifting for each of those characters. Not to mention just being a really fun episode. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into B tier. Next we have the Jury episode. This is Unfulfilled Jury. I think that is a pun on the idea of a full jury, maybe? I'm not sure. So Unfulfilled Jury is the first Jury episode, and it's a duel. Whereas Mickey got a two-parter, Jury just got one. And I do wonder, if Jury had gotten 2 parts, if they would have taken 2 episodes for Jury, would she be better off or worse off? Because I think for Mickey, it helped. I'd never have thought that it'd be good if he only had 1. I think that it made sense to do 2 episodes for the pacing. This episode of Jury does a lot of stuff in 1 episode then, and I think it manages it well. It has to set up Jury's sort of love triangle past with Shiori and that boy that they used to know. And then it has to subvert that idea near the end to reveal that the one in her locket was Shiori, and it needs to, give us a convincing reason for Jury, who originally seems like the more composed, restrained member of the student council, to actually want to fight Utena and fight to win. And I think it does a good job with those things. For those reasons, I'm going to put this also in B tier, which I know B tier is starting to look very filled right now. I promise there'll be other types of episodes, but I think that there's nothing wrong with there being a little bit of unbalance here. A lot of the episodes early on into the series are, I would say, a cut above average. They're pretty good. But I think the show will hit peaks later on as well that go just a little bit higher. This brings us to yet another Nanami episode, which is Curried High Trip. This is, the first one I normally think of as a Nanami episode, quote-unquote. She uses this powder to form an explosion, basically, that's meant to be like a minor prank, I guess, on Anthy and Utena. Just like a small kitchen fire. No big deal. But then it does a big old poof, and likely because of Anthy's meddlings and using her magic in the background, their personalities get switched due to Anthy's cooking. But Nanami believes it's due to the ancient curry spice. So Nanami has to go over to India to try to find the spice again to switch their personalities back. So it's both a Nanami joke episode where Nanami goes on her own in an adventure with India full of like elephants, surfing, and craziness, as well as, a body switch Freaky Friday kind of scenario. This episode's really good. And it works both as a humorous episode, but also as a way of, kind of giving positive traits to Nanami. Yes, Nanami was trying to, blow up the kitchen with the, not with Anthy and Utena and other students in there, which is not a good thing to do. At the same time, when she owns up to her mistake, she's willing to go to extreme lengths to make things right. Maybe if it's for the approval of her brother, but she's still trying to aggressively fix the situation. She's not deflecting the responsibility or arguing that it's not her fault. She goes right into India and risks her life time and time again to get this spice. And then there's the hilarious payoff at the end where she gets the spice. Out of nowhere, a banana peel drops, probably from Choo Choo throwing it, and all of a sudden she trips, whoop, and the spice is blown up and blown in the wind by the elephants blowing their trunks. Hilarious payoff. I'm going to put the Curry High Trip episode in A tier because it is such a good balance of humor as well as characterization for Nanami and for Utena and Anthy, seeing what they're like in each other's bodies. You get Mickey reacting that, Anthy doing all these assertive sports and doing all these kind of more assertive actions, slapping Nanami's goons back, that can't be his Anthy. So you get a lot of characterization for like everyone involved. There's a hilarious payoff in this episode with the exchange diary with Saionji, which is our first glimpse of the sillier side of Saionji, where, we see the absolute absurdism of his drawing where he proclaims to defeat Utena, and he might be actually sincere in his love for her, for Anthy. So really good episode. Speaking of really good episodes, episode 9, The Castle Said to Hold Eternity. This episode is really weird once you finish the series and go back to it, because it's really a microcosm of, like, the entire ending arc. We get our first glimpses of Toga and Saionji as kids going into the church and finding the little girl with pink hair, who very clearly is Utena or Utena adjacent, in the coffin, and, Toga kind of caressing her hair, Saionji looking on in confusion, and they leave that night. And Saionji's left with the feeling that Toga had shown Utena something eternal. That somehow Toga had gotten ahead of him in development and maturity and was able to show Utena something eternal. And Saionji ever since then basically has been fixated on surpassing Toga. So it sets up Saionji's main motivation. We've had 2 duels up to this point for Saionji, but they mostly focused on his possessiveness over Anthy. But now we get the other personal stakes involved in Saionji's fighting. It's to try to become, like, Toga's equal. It also then gives us backstory on Utena that's very mysterious, kind of dark, and, again, that sort of fable-like atmosphere where Utena herself is never identified as Utena in the coffin. It's obviously her hair and her voice, but she's silhouetted, sort of that shadow play idea, which I think really does a lot for the mood. And speaking of shadow plays, the shadow girls in this episode, their like interlude play is so on point for the themes of this whole entire thing about the illusory nature of all these things that these characters are pursuing may not really fully be there. And then there's the reference they drop of like, please, let us just have the UFOs, which, heavily implied throughout the series that the Shadow Girls are connected to aliens and UFOs. There's shots where the UFO spacecraft kind of falls from the sky, crashes, and then we get the Shadow Girl plays. So this episode, is really, really amazing. And I'm going to put it as the first S-tier episode. I think it lays out the groundwork of so many significant moments that are going to happen later in the series, that it is just a remarkable episode to watch upon rewatch. And that whole final moment in this episode where Anthe's in the coffin, Saionji's there, the castle in the sky's crumbling on top of them. It's foreshadowing to the nth degree, but I think it's handled really, really, really well. Now we are about 1/4 through the series. Episode 10, Nanami's Precious Thing. This is the first Nanami duel episode. This episode really, I think, scales back on Nanami as the joke character, which we've seen recently. And now we're getting Nanami as really disturbed is a word I'd probably use right away, but a conflicted character, to say the least, where her motivations to please her brother are shown in the past to take such extreme measures. She wants so desperately to please her brother that, when it comes for his birthday when they're children, she finds the stray cat, she's all dirty and gross from trying to get the cat, brings it into the house, and, Toga welcomes it openly, but she starts to notice that, Toga's paying more attention to the cat than her, which drives Nanami to such a point of jealousy as a child that she's willing to drown the cat. And showing the cruelty of Nanami being rooted in a sense of true dedication. And dedication rooted in the sense of needing Toga's attention. That it's a self-serving desire for approval and attention from her brother, who she sees as everything. Manifesting in probably one of my favorite duels of the entire series, where Nanami, very quickly loses in the normal duel to Utena, but then the music kind of kicks back in as Nanami processes the situation, and she pulls out the second weapon, and she goes back for Utena and tries to actually kill Utena after the duel would have been over. One of the main critiques I would offer of Utena as a negative, especially when I first viewed this show, is that it's so repetitive in its duel structure that, Utena only loses one time. She only loses to Toga, and that's really in the next episode. But everything else is so formulaic that, there's a setup, Utena fights a duel, Utena wins. And it's deviated so rarely, especially during the Black Rose arc, where if Utena lost, Anthe would die. That's the stakes that are being set, which you would assume that, they're probably not going to kill Anthe right now, so you expect for, a good, 8 episodes in a row that there's no way that Utena would lose. So, having an episode like the Nanami episode where it breaks the structure even just a little, that Nanami does not care about eternity or the Rose Bride or any of that sort of nonsense. She's not here to fight for the Student Council or fight for revolutionizing the world. Nanami is here to fight for her prince Toga, and she'll do anything. She will kill the cat in the past, she'll kill Utena in the present, and that is exceptional characterization for Nanami. I'm going to put that straight into S tier. I think this episode is fantastic. But also, I'm biased, I'm a Nanami fan, so I don't know. It could be that too. I would say that if not S tier, then it would at least be A tier, even if it wasn't the case that it has Best Girl Nanami in it. Episode 11. We get the first of 2 Toga-based episodes. This is the biggest break in the series formula because Utena actually loses the duel. And it does get deeper into Toga's motivations, Toga's manipulations. He's trying to make Utena think that he is her prince, only to then challenge her in the duel, shake her foundation, and, ultimately steal back the Rose Bride. I'm not as huge into this episode as I am with Nanami, just because, again, I think Nanami's characterization is fantastic and pretty much flawless, whereas the Toga episode I felt less invested in because he was so obviously foreshadowed as a manipulating guy. Maybe you might have thought your first viewing he could be the prince, but he looks nothing like the prince that's shown in the silhouetted flashbacks at the beginning of the episodes. So I always thought, like, obviously he's lying. So when it's kind of implied that, oh, he was actually doing this just to get the duel, it was kind of an obvious reveal. Whereas with the Nanami episode before, I didn't know going in that she would kill a cat and try to kill Utena. That did surprise me and did actually change my perceptions. But I'm going to give this episode still an A. I think it is a really, really good episode. Even if nothing else, just for breaking the formula. It's followed up then by episode 12, For Friendship Perhaps, which is another strange one because Utena, sort of reacting to her defeat, decides to remove the duelist uniform, her prince uniform, and adopt the clothing of just a regular high school girl at a Torii Academy. And it's another regular high school girl at a Torii Academy, her friend Wakaba, who works so hard to snap her out of it. And Utena ultimately regains her composure, goes back, and fights Toga for the win. This episode's weird to me, and I'm really not sure how to judge it, because it's heavily clarified in this episode that Anthy, would betray Utena in the sense that when Toga's the one who won the Rose Bride, she follows Toga's command fully, to the point where you can tell in the way she's acting that she just views Utena as a student, and she's willing to just show Utena to her face that the way she was acting before for Utena was at least partly, if not fully, because Utena was telling her to do those things. The reason why Anthy wanted to make friends and, change to be more social is because Utena kept telling her that's what she wants. So we see that under, Toga's control, she's a totally different person. We didn't get a chance to see that as much with Sayoji, because most of the time we just saw Sayoji abusing her. But here we do see Anthy acting quite a bit differently under Toga. And obviously that's part of Toga's manipulations and Toga's control, and Utena represents maybe a better form of coercion, but she was still just molding Anthy into what she wanted Anthy to be. But I'm mixed, because in terms of framing, Utena never picks this up, and she kind of ends the episode returning to the status quo without actually realizing that idea. And that's not necessarily a flaw of the episode, but it does leave me a little bit confused, because for the rest of the Black Rose arc, and for even, I'd say, a good half of the last arcs with Akio and the End of the World Apocalypse Saga, she still hasn't learned that lesson. So it does feel like this is like the climax of development that then got stunted. That at that point Utena reached a block where she wasn't able to really grow. And as an audience to the Black Rose arc, we start to maybe look at Anthy a bit differently, but Utena doesn't. I think it makes it a kind of a weird, complex episode. Wakaba's great in it, though. I am going to give it a B. I thought of giving it a C. To me, a C is too harsh. I think at that point, I'm taking out my personal frustrations with Utena as a person for not realizing what she's doing, not realizing there's more to Anthy than what she thinks. But that's taking out my personal frustrations on the episode itself, which I don't think that drags everything down. I think it just adds a layer of complexity. I would have liked to see more growth of Utena's awareness of Anthy gradually later, but that'd be a different show at that point, so I guess I'll have to just make peace with myself on that. Then we get to episode 13, Tracing a Path, which is the first of a few recap episodes in the series. Obviously, recap episodes in anime are not always the best. They're reused content. In this case, the new content we get is Dios on the ball, talking to who we learn as Akio, back and forth about the different duels. But it's, for the most part, just a pretty standard recap episode. I don't think it's a bad one, though. I think it's got some really nice visuals. The stuff that is new is pretty good, but I'm going to go ahead and put that in C tier. I don't think it's much special. It's got some good moments, but that's what it is. I'm also just going to put the first Black Rose episode also in C tier. That is The Boys of the Black Rose, which is your Kane episode. It spends most of its time, I think, developing the Black Rose duel and Mikage and Mamiya. I think it spends more time on that, which allows it to get that idea across, but doesn't really develop Kane. Kane is a very weak first duelist. I don't think Kane was articulated in a particularly captivating way. You could argue they didn't have a lot of time in the episode to do that, but we've seen already episodes that have had the same amount of time do more with their runtime in terms of characterization and higher stakes. Kane just feels really out of left field when she suddenly duels. Even when you look at an episode like Jury's, Unfulfilled Jury, You know, we knew who Jury was prior. We knew that she was respected and kind of feared even by the students and staff at the school. We see her kind of reach this emotional climax with her wanting to disprove the power of miracles and everything going on with the love triangle. She had real personal stakes in it. We're left kind of confused about Kanae's, I think, and exactly who she is even. And again, I think it's because the attention in the episode is divided. Then we go to our next Black Rose episode, which I think is a stronger one, which is the landscape framed by Kozue. This one we actually meet current, present time, middle school version of Kozue, who is Mickey's sister, who Mickey was so fixated on in his 2 episodes earlier. We see her, I wouldn't say promiscuous, might be too strong of a word. We're not really sure how far she goes with these boys, but this flirty side at the very least with the boys that Mickey seems to disapprove of, but also her aggressiveness to protect Mickey, kind of reminding me a lot of Nanami with Toga, if Toga wasn't the strong man he is. If Toga was almost a Mitsudu type character, I would almost say. Because Kozue sees this sort of lecherous teacher preying on Mickey and pushes the dude down the flight of stairs. She seems to take very drastic measures. She's seen as kind of this foil to Mickey, and I think the episode's pretty good for doing that, and for showing her reasons to want to fixate or have Mickey fixate on her. It leaves a little bit of ambiguity and room there, I think, for interpretation of the age-old Utena question, how incestuous is this? Which, you know, viewers' mileage will vary on what you think of that in terms of their relationship. But at the very least, very possessive. Again, kind of like Nanami. I'm going to give it a B tier. I'm going to say it's pretty good. Then we are at the infamous legendary Cowbell of Happiness, episode 16. I don't even know what to say about this one. If you've seen the series, I don't think I have to elaborate too much. Either this sells you on it or it doesn't. Like, it's such an absurd premise that either you love it and you're just here for it and it's just a wild ride, or it probably annoyed you because it's a break from the actual, like, tension of the show and it's just kind of stupid and doesn't really, quote-unquote, matter. I think it shows Nanami's social ineptness and how she's, like, simultaneously at the top of the social ladder and one of, like, the elite socialites of the school, but she is so naive to a comical and kind of almost tragic end, which I think is taken into her character really well later. I'm gonna just put this in S tier. That was probably the episode that made me realize when I first watched the show that I loved the show. You know, we're talking, quite a bit into the show at this point, almost halfway, but this was probably the point when I first watched it. I'm like, yep, this is real good. You know who's not real good? Shiori. I know, controversial opinion that Shiori might be mean. So Shiori's episode, we are looking at episode, let me see my list here, 17, The Thorns of Death. So in case you're not picking up the subtlety of Thorns of Death, we get the implication that Shiori is just this, she's the thorniest rose of the Black Rose arc. She's the most willing to hurt the object of her affection? I say that with like 5 question marks after. Yeah, she's real aggressive. But this episode shows Shiori learning about Jury's locket, learning about the secret that Jury has, and using that as a motivation to duel. You know, the more I think about it, though, the more I'm kind of left wondering how much it really established, because unless I'm just not remembering all of this episode, we already knew from Jury's episode, Jury's secret. This is more just Shiori realizing it and getting to know how bad she is. And I feel like that's kind of like what we got with Kozue. But with Kozue, at least, I don't know. I guess I feel like I was learning more in the Kozue episode. I'm still going to give it a B tier, because if nothing else, I think Shiori is very memorable as a character. And I think that it's still a good episode, and the stakes are high. This is someone who I think straight up would kill the Rose Bride, like, no questions asked. Even if there's no, like, personal motivation, she might just do it. I mean, like, Shiori, yeah, she might just do it. Mitsudu, we get Mitsudu's impatience. This is where we focus in on Nanami's pretend elementary school boyfriend, who wants to also be her little brother. We get all this stuff with him trying to work out his idea of what it means to grow up. I think that his motivation to be a Black Rose duelist and kill Anthe is very weak. At that point, to get this kid to want to kill Anthe, it makes me really wonder how much the Black Rose arc and Mikage are, actually mind-controlling these people. Because I think it's one thing to assume that Kozue or Shiori, out of desperation, would take very drastic measures and might only take a little bit of a push to go over the edge. Mitsudu seems like a generally protective, kind of sincere boy for most of the show. So for him to just want to straight out murder a high school girl seems real out of character. And I think there's some good moments in it, but I'm going to put it in C tier. I think it's good. I think it's alright, but I don't think it's a particularly strong episode for Mitsudu or for the series. Then we get episode 19, A Song for a Kingdom Now Lost. This is the Onion Prince episode. Goes through Wakaba's past with this boy. The name never matters, so I'm not even going to bother. The Onion Prince, who is rejected ultimately from being a Black Rose duelist. The most interesting thing I think to look back on is the fact that he is rejected. It gives us more of an insight into what the Black Rose, duels are like, how exactly people are chosen. It's a good, exception that proves the rule sort of situation. Helps us piece together more of exactly how those things work. And then the ending is such an incredible bait and switch to find out about Wakaba's actual interest in Saionji. That, I think, is really good. But I really think the best things about it are those small elements. I don't remember much of the episode beyond that. I don't think the Onion Prince himself is a super memorable guy. I'm going to put that in C tier. Who is a super memorable guy, though, is my man, Saionji. In episode 20, Wakaba Flourishing, straight into S tier. Straight into S tier. Best Black Rose arc episode by leagues. By leagues. At least in terms of the main Black Rose duels. Wakaba fighting Utena is so, high in emotional stakes for Utena herself. Fantastic. I love Saionji. I love comedy Saionji. I love sincere Saionji. I think it genuinely pulls at the heartstrings for me, seeing the lengths he would go to of making, the wooden leaf hair clip, and Wakaba's genuine interest in living this sort of domestic life with him, but then how quickly he just throws that away for the chance to get back into power. It shows so many layers to Saionji, so many layers to Wakaba. The fact that she's driven to such a point of willing to kill. I've often thought this was, if anyone was going to actually beat Utena, it would be Wakaba in the Black Rose arc. And I think that, if she would have succeeded in killing Anthe, what a different show this would have been. I've definitely had some ideas of fan fiction with that, because holy cow, what an episode. I love that episode. I absolutely love that episode. Which I don't think does any favors for Keiko's. I think that coming right after Wakaba's episode, Keiko feels like a D-tier episode. And I'm hesitating over it, though, because I think part of the problem is that it comes right after Wakaba's. Wakaba has such incredibly strong motivations as a familiar character in the Black Rose arc. It's one of the very few, next to Mitsudu, we actually know her before the Black Rose episode, and the stakes are high, and it just feels really impactful, and, maybe she actually might do some damage. But then we get to Keiko, it's like, there's no way this random girl is gonna kill Anthe. And we don't know who she is. Utena even reacts at the duel like, who are you? There's this sense in which Keiko is so out of left field. And I'm torn, because when I first watched the show, this is the episode I probably would have been the quickest to just tell people, you could skip it. When I was showing the show to friends, this is the episode I'd be like, it doesn't really matter, because you're not expecting Keiko to win anyway. If Keiko would have actually won the duel and killed Anthe, I don't know if anyone would have wanted that. It would have been so unearned, so to speak. Maybe you could do something with that idea that it felt unearned, but really out of left field. At the same time, I don't think it's a bad episode. I really don't. I think it's fine. It's just the timing and placement of it did not do any favors for it. So I'm going to put it in C tier. I'm not happy about it, but I'm going to put it in C tier. Rounding out the Black Rose arc, we get episodes 22 and 23. 22 being Nemuro Memorial Hall, and 23 being The Terms of a Duelist. Kind of like with the Mickey episode, I feel like these two really do go back to back. And I'd rank them pretty similarly as a result. I'm really torn on these two because Mikage as a character is interesting. I do like Mikage. Mamiya as Anthe basically, gender swapped and manipulating the memories and emotions of Mikage is interesting. Tokiko's manifestations and how he sees Utena as the real Tokiko, but doesn't even recognize the real Tokiko walk by him in the hallway. Interesting stuff. Especially in, the first, Mikage episode, where you get all the pointing arrows, Ikuhara as the director being like, look at this! Look at this! Look at this! With everything going on in the background. That's really cool. Really, really memorable and identifiable visual quirk. Some great moments thrown in. Super mysterious. But it's also arguably not very well told. There's that hard situation I find myself in where it's it's not straightforward, but is it badly told? Should I know going into this episode and then leaving this episode? Should I understand it? Because I think these are the two most episodes out of the entire series likely to be misunderstood by viewers and very confusing. And are they confusing on purpose? Or are they confusing just kind of incidentally? And how much does it being on purpose make it any better? Am I satisfied with the fact that I feel like I didn't understand what was going on till my third or fourth watching? And even then, I'm still kind of confused about this arc. I don't know. It definitely has been one of the most interesting to keep thinking about, but it's harder for me to connect to the characters of the situation when I'm still left really wondering about Mikage as a character. I'm gonna put them in B tier. But I'm going to put them in B tier with the knowing that elements of it are A and elements of it are C. It's not B. It's B on an average scale, but it's B out of extremes of A and C fusing together. Kind of violently shifting. Episode 24 is a recap episode, The Secret Nanami Diary, and I'm going to put this in D tier. Our first D tier episode. I love Nanami. I think I've made that very clear that Nanami is one of my faves, right? You have two Nanami-centric episodes at the top, and then another Nanami episode here over at A tier. Clearly, I like Nanami a lot, but I don't think that this episode is very strong. There are recap episodes in this show that I think do a better job pushing out new information. I don't think we needed a recap on Nanami's episodes at all up to this point. I don't think we need a recap right after the Black Rose arc. I don't know, I guess, in Japan, airing-wise, when this aired. I don't know if this was, after a break or, the week immediately following the previous episode. But coming right off the heels of The Terms of a Duelist, this episode just feels off. It does not belong here. I don't think there's enough comic relief to, really make it work, because it's old comic relief, for the most part. And I don't know, after the last episode, I want comic relief kind of this type. It's recapping that stuff that didn't need to be recapped, and it's not offering me much anything new, and I don't think it's very good on its own. So I would say it's a D tier, even if the moments it's recapping are good on their own. Episode 25 is Their Eternal Apocalypse, which is the first of the Akio arc duels, I guess you would say. It's the first duel with Saionji now in our kind of our home stretch of the show. I think it's kind of riding off the coattails of The Castle Said to Hold Eternity, and I think for that reason it was actually a good pick as the first Aki episode, because, unlike with Kane, who I don't think was a very strong start, we already know Saionji, we already know about him, and starting with Saionji then lets us have a pretty stable background for getting our feet wet with Akio's in these last duels. I do think, however, for an Akio duel, it was rather unclear exactly Saionji's motivation to duel. His is not the strongest. I'm going to put this in B tier. It's still, it's the first time you're seeing this bizarre car fight situation. It's a very memorable episode with good moments, but I don't think it's particularly the strongest. I think stronger than it is the one that followed, where we get Mickey's Nest Box, the Sunlit Garden Arranged. This one I'm going to drop straight into A tier. Is it A or A? I'm just going to put it in A tier for now, at least. It might be S tier. But This is where Mickey and Kozue's storyline really reaches its peak of intensity. You get everything with the milkshakes, with the tree being cut, the baby birds, I believe is this episode. Although maybe that's just the regular Kozue. I blank a little bit. No, I think it's this one. Yeah, it's the baby birds is this one. Because the episode ends with Mickey building the actual bird's home. You have Kozue during the actual duel. She's like making advances on Anthe in the car, which distracts Mickey. There's so much like tension going on, both of like a character tension as well as like sexual tension. And it ramps up all the different weird, like, Oedipal kind of vibes, Freudian kind of vibes, where Anthe is literally his mother on the phone. So much stuff to, like, dig into, and I think it really brings Mickey's character to, a frantic close in terms of his duels. It unhinges him. It drives him to that point of really fighting to get what he wants by force and by impurity, and, for better or worse, ends him, in an angrier, like, kind of dissatisfied way, where he is clashing with his sister, but maybe actually seeing her on her own terms as a result of that. No longer looking at just the old version of his sister, but grappling with the realities of who they are now. Really interesting episode, really good. It's maybe S tier, but definitely S tier is Nanami's Egg. Nanami's Egg is fantabulous. Copy and paste what I said about Cowbell Happiness right over to the Egg episode. But I even say I like the Egg episode better. It does so much for comedy for me. I mean, it's hilarious. I think it's the funniest episode of Utena. The My Ball gag with Jury, the Tamago, the pun that happens there. The stuff with Saionji and the eggs he's cooking in the English dub. Saionji, "It's ruined!" is one of the funniest voiced lines in the English dub. Just incredible humor. But also really what it does for Nanami at an actual serious level, that she's willing to disobey her brother to keep this egg, that she takes on this maternal quality. It shows Nanami as someone nurturing, when this is the same girl who killed a cat. I think it really shows her diversity and her, variations. Fantastic stuff. This brings us to episode 28, Whispers in the Dark, and episode 29, Azure Paler Than the Sky. These are the two Jury episodes. I think this is almost like revenge for the fact that she didn't get 2 episodes at the beginning of the series. Mickey got 2, she only got 1. Now she's getting 2 for this arc. That being said, I'm decidedly less set on them. I'm not a particular fan of Ruka as a character, and I think that the way he's explained and clarified is kind of clumsy and feels out of nowhere for me. And I understand that's not necessarily a universal opinion. And this is one case where I do think the two-parter system, actually, there is a difference. I think that the first part is weaker than the second part. The first part setting up Ruka is a little confusing and weird, but to me, Jory shines more when she actually gets the duel. And the moment where she rips off her own Rose, forfeiting the situation, and the rain is on her, I don't know. I think it's a great moment for the series, and I think it's a great moment for Jury, and I think that alone elevates it to B tier for me. Next, we have episode 30, The Barefoot Girl. This is an episode where there isn't a duel. It's more of build-up of Utena and Akio's relationship. The standout moment for me, though, is actually with Kanae, who I told you before I'm not really a huge fan of. I don't think she's very well explained. But there's this... I think that might have been Akio outside right now. I just heard a very loud motor. With Kanae, she's not the best explained character, but the stuff that she has there with the few moments she's there in this episode, cryptically, in this room where she is being I think fed these pieces of apples, but there's you can tell by the way if you pause on certain frames that there's 3 kind of darker skinned hands there, I believe. So it's Akio's there, but so is Anthe. And there's all these forks stabbed into the apple, and it's super eerie and really sets home on a subliminal level how menacing Akio and Anthe are as a group, as a duo. So it builds up that sort of characterization of Akio. It builds up Utena. It does some good groundwork for them. I'm going to put it in B tier. Then we have another Nanami-focused episode, but decidedly not comedy episode. This is going to be her tragedy, followed closely by episode 32, the romance of the dancing girls. And whereas her tragedy sets up the situation, romance of the dancing girls is the actual fight as a result of it. I'm going to also separate these two in terms of quality, because I think that her tragedy is fantastic. It's an S tier episode, and I think that the dancing girls episode is a really low A. And the things that make it A for me are the parts where it has Nanami dealing with the realizations that she had in the episode prior, but that the strongest parts in the second episode come from the first episode. So her tragedy, episode 31, shakes Nanami's foundations, with Toga saying they're not actually blood relatives, her kind of realizing that, and kind of breaking from Toga as a result. And Nanami's dueling in the next episode, the reason why it's not S tier for me is that I really think Nanami's motivations to duel, her exchanges in the car with Akio, I don't think they're as strong as they could be or as clear as they could be. I do think that they're on an actually fantastic foundation, though. So I'm going to give it a low A ranking, if nothing else just because it's tied so well. But I could see this being a B episode. I really could, but it's still off the heels of Nanami's dealing with those emotions, and it does do that very, very well when it's there. We get episode 33, The Prince Who Runs Through the Night. This is a recap episode, but it is also S tier, because the moments that are new are so incredible from a directing standpoint and from a character building standpoint. This is the seduction of Utena. This is Utena's fall from grace. This is Akio's ultimate evil that we see him commit to Utena. It's a lot of things, but this is ultimately Utena at her lowest point. The way this is shot, the way that we're kind of viewing it almost from Akio's perspective, we don't find that out till later, though. The stuff in the bed where she's talking about food. What is eternity, man? It's a fantastic episode, and I do think the recapping is helpful. I think the recapping is helpful as we wind out the show. This is how you do a recap episode well. I normally wouldn't give a recap episode S tier, but man, this is so important and so well done. So well done. It's followed up by 34, The Rose Crest, which is another definitive episode in S tier. This is where you get two different countering, slightly contradictory versions of the story of what exactly Anthe and Akio are in their past. You get the version in the school play, and you get the version from Utena's forgotten memories of herself as a child talking to Dios and seeing the Rose Bride being impaled by the blades. As set up for what's going to happen later, it's fantastic. It's the moment where really the curtain is dropped, and the show's trying to explain to you by hitting you over the head with ideas, and I think it does it very well. This great thumbnail over here with Toga the unicorn with the carrot. I'm glad that whoever made this tier maker list, they decided to use that. This is The Love That Blossomed in Wintertime, followed up by its second part, and thus opens the Doorway of Night, the two Toga-related episodes, with 35 here being the setup and 36 being the payoff. Really strong for what they do for Toga, and even for Saionji. I will say there's a slight quality difference for me, where I'm going to put the first part in B tier and the second part in A tier. The second part being stronger, one, because I believe this is where we have Saionji riding second cart on the motorcycle, and he stands up T-posing, and that's an amazing comedy moment, but also because this is Toga's last-ditch effort to save Utena, and in that moment, I think it's really strong. He has that tender moment with Utena, and that's really strong, too. And then lastly, the 3 episodes that round off the series. We have 37, The One to Revolutionize the World, which is kind of the path to the actual end of the show, where Utena, gets warned by several characters about what's going to happen, especially Nanami, really trying to reach out to Utena here. We have End of the World, where Utena is actually going into duel. This is where you get cutaways to the other duelists, discarding their rings, discarding their student council ideas, And you get Jury suddenly talking about the friend of hers who drowned. Well, no, the friend of hers who was saved by the boy who drowned. They both forgot the name. Some great moments there. And then you have the last episode, and Someday Together We'll Shine, which I don't think I need to say too much. It's the incredible finale of the series. I'm just going to plop them where I think they go, although all three of them definitely blur together. I think that the one to revolutionize the world is A tier, and I think that the final two parts are S tier. I think that the show has an incredible ending. One of the strongest endings I've seen of really any series, anime or not. I think that last episode is phenomenal. So what I like to do at the end is I like to go ahead and rank within the categories. I don't have to do anything for D tier because straight up Nanami's Secret Diary is just my least favorite episode. It's the only one that I think is below average. But then within these other categories, the further to the left is the higher I'm going to rank that episode. So this is a little bit of a different process, considering these episodes don't have numbers, so I'm going to have to kind of struggle through. But the thumbnails, thankfully, will give us some clarity on where I would rank them within the categories. But I actually think this order might not be too far from what I do think. I do think that Keiko's is a weaker one. I do think that this recap episode, by virtue of being a kind of semi-good recap episode, I think fits about there. Yeah, I'm going to go with this. I think that the worst of them is Keiko's episode, for reasons I've explained earlier as far as the placement of it. It's almost D tier for me, but I do look at it kind of on its own, and I see it's not that bad. Onion Prince isn't that memorable of a character, but it does do some good setup for the next episode with Wakaba flourishing. Not as big of a fan of the Ruka character and Shiori stuff. I do think that this is only just barely a difference between these two, because I do think that the recap episode is not that strong, but as an introduction to Dios and Akio, it's pretty cryptic, and that's kind of fun. It's got some good imagery. These three actually offer some substance. I would just say that the Mitsudu episode is kind of weak in its motivations. This at least introduces the Black Rose arc, and this has got some good Saionji content, so I'll keep it within that order. B tier is a behemoth. Within these categories, oh my gosh, I think that the Mickey two-parter is really strong. I think that this is really strong. Jury is good. This is going to be lower. Oh, I never even realized these thumbnails, how similar they are. I feel kind of silly for not realizing how similar these thumbnails are until this exact moment. Really good job. I'll have to make sure I credit who made this. This tier maker will be in the description of the video if you want to fill it out for yourself. But I'll make sure I give a shout out at the end here to whoever made this, because that's a really good job. I like that. But yeah, that's a good episode. I do think that, yeah, I'll give that though. I'll even do this. Yeah, I'll do that. Shiori, yeah. This is a little stronger. This is stronger. I'm going to commit to that. So I'm going to say of B tier, Saionji's first duel back with the student council in the last arc of the show. It's his last duel. This one's the weakest B tier, just because the motivations for him aren't the strongest. This is mostly just a setup of the Akio arc. The stuff with Mikage, I've already kind of explained my confusion with it and mixed feelings. Jory, a little lower because it comes off the Ruka episode that I'm not as big of a fan of, but I do think it has some really highlights for her character. Shiori, on a similar note, my ambivalent mixed feelings on the Utsuna's realization in this episode. We have Kozue, pretty strong episode, but I don't think it's as strong as the stuff we get later with just her, well, stuff we get earlier with her brother, I should say. You have Akio, and there's bigger episodes later that deal with Akio and Utena, but this is still a good strong one. Utena and Anthy having the ball is really good because it builds up their relationship. Toga's first parter sets up kind of his, I don't want to say really redemption arc, but kind of a redemption arc. Jury's episode is good. The animal one sets up a first kind of comedy for Nanami. That's really good. And then again, the strong Mickey opening. A tier, much shorter, thankfully. I mean, I like having A-tier episodes, but I'm selfishly glad right now for the easier nature to rank these within their categories. I would say that Curry Hide Trip is really, really strong. I would say that the Toga second parter is really strong. I'm going to move up the third to last episode to about here, and I'll say that's good. So I'm going to say my least favorite here is the Nanami episode part 2 for the third and final duel with Nanami. Well, I think it's actually your second duel technically, but the third arc duel, I should say. Just because, again, I think it's stronger in the first part than the second part. The stuff with reaching the... Actually, you don't move that up. Move that up further. I am wrong in my opinions. I need to give more credit to the final Mickey Kozue part. That one's really strong. In fact, is it stronger than Toga? It's stronger than Toga. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. It is my second favorite A tier. So, yeah. So it's the Nanami one. Then it's the third to last. Then I would say it's Toga beating Utena. Then it's the first episode. Very strong episode. Toga's last duel with Utena. The Mickey Kozue ending. And then Curry High Trip. S tier. Oh, no. Oh, no. This is really bad, guys. This is really bad. I just need to flail around a little bit here and work this out live in front of you. I hope this is quality entertainment to see me suffer for a hot minute here. These are not final. I'm just moving them around right now. I think that the final episode is fantastic, and I don't want to set that too low. I do think that Nanami's egg needs to go right in front of the Cowbell one for sure. Wakaba Flourishing is so good. Her tragedy is so good. Is this what I think? No, I need to move that down a little bit. I think this is what I think. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to commit the plunge. I'm going to say the lowest S tier, but still an S tier episode, is the second to last. Then I'm going to go with the big reveals of the history of the witch, Anthe, the prince, all that stuff with the play, and also the past memories of little girl Anthe, little girl Utena, young Dios. The recap episode with Utena and Akio together. The episode 9 with everything it kind of is a distillation of the themes of the whole entire series. Nanami having her tragedy episode where she breaks from Toga and the high emotional stakes of that. It's right next to the episode that really established them together in the first place, which was Nanami's first duel. Just barely edged out, I would say. Then there's Wakaba episode, and Wakaba's episode, Wakaba Flourishing, is so clearly the best Black Rose duelist episode. It has to be there. Cowbell of Happiness and Nanami's Egg. I don't think I need to say why. You either will agree or you won't. I mean, these episodes, I gotta imagine, are polarizing, as well as Nanami in general, because it's whether you vibe with that or not, and I do. And then the last episode. For fun, I will say also that if the movie Adolescence of Utena was counted as an episode, I would also probably put that in S tier, but I would probably put that in the lower end of S tier. Probably in between The Prince Who Runs Through Night and The Castle Said to Hold Eternity. I'd probably put it right here on the lower, third of S tier. And that's going to be it for today. Let me just go real quickly here and look at who made this. It is made by Ritsuko, so maybe an Evangelion fan. I'm gonna credit this person here. Ritsuko. Oh, sorry, the full title. I need to hover my cursor over it. Where was that at? Ritsuko is a lesbian. There we go. I mean, probably, if we've seen Evangelion. Not to spoil things, I guess. That's going to be it for today for this ranking. Thank you so much for joining me. And for the revolution of the world, ciao!